everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're just making sure everyone's logging in and not having any issues. Then we're going to get rolling. Thanks so much. All right, everyone, I think we're going to get rolling. We want to be cognizant of your time. So I want to thank all of y'all for coming to be a part of our webinar tonight. Tonight we'll be doing So You Think You Know Traffic Safety Part 2. This is a follow-up to a webinar we did last year where we had subject matter experts discussing some of our traffic safety issues we find out on the road. So tonight is the second one, and we're going to be elaborating on kind of what we covered last year. So in a similar format, it's kind of being peer-led. We have a senior from Lafayette High School, Miss Avery Lemaire, will be the one posing questions to our subject matter experts. We got a great group of folks here representing a very wide, representation of traffic safety individuals. We have emergency services, we have law enforcement, we've got engineers. So we got everyone here to hopefully give you some education regarding traffic safety. Regarding the CEUs tonight for the class, you will get 2. After this webinar, we will be sending out a quiz tomorrow morning. You'll have about a week to complete that for those that indicated on the registration. Once we get those in, we'll process all the CEUs and those will be emailed to you directly. So that's a little bit regarding the logistics of the webinar. We're going to just kind of get right into it. We're going to actually be starting with Trooper Danny Flynn. He's going to be covering graduated driver's licenses as well as impaired driving. So Danny, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself. Let us know what agency you work for and how these issues relate to your role in your job.
Absolutely. First, I want to thank everyone for attending tonight. I know we have a large audience out here, and I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to go over these topics that are very important to all drivers that are out there sharing the roads with our families. So thank you all so much for attending. My name is Danny Flynn. Been working with Louisiana State Police for a little over 18 years now. And my entire career, I've worked in a patrol division, which basically is trying to do whatever we possibly can to make sure that your families and you are as safe as possible when you're on the roads and traveling to your destination. So obviously that encompasses a ton of information. But we try to do the best we can with the few number of guys that we have out there. And that encompasses speed enforcement, seatbelt enforcement, DWI enforcement, and anything else that we happen to come across on the roadways. Removing disabled motorists, investigating crashes. So we have a lot of work out there for us to do, and we stay pretty busy at that. So I'm glad to be here, and hopefully I can answer any questions that y'all have.
Awesome, thank you, Danny. You want to give us a brief overview of the graduated driver's licenses in Louisiana, how that program works, and how it relates to our young drivers out there?
Absolutely. So the graduated driver's license laws really came about because I don't know if you all remember. I know when I first got my driver's license, I wasn't required to go through all these steps to get my license. Okay, I could just, as long as I passed the written test and took a drive around the corner with someone from the Office of Motor Vehicles and didn't hit anything, I pretty much got my driver's license. And unfortunately, we had a lot of teenagers who used to get involved in crashes within about the first 6 months to a year of them getting their full-fledged driver's license at 15 years old. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Most of it was based on inexperience, but also their maturity levels and just their ability to process the amount of information that's needed to drive safely. So we've used other states' examples of their graduated driver's license laws and finally put our own in place in Louisiana. I believe every state in the country now has a GDL law that their drivers have to go through in order to go through these different stages. So we'll kind of touch on each one individually. At first, at 14, you're able to get your tip card, which is mandatory, and it really gives us an opportunity to get your students or your children's, teenagers' information into our database so that we know who is actually driving on the roads. Before the tip cards were mandated, we had no idea of who it was that was driving these vehicles with these instructors with the driving schools other than the driving school instructor. And if they got into a crash, we had no way of finding out who they were, notifying next of kin, those kind of things. So at least it just gives them an ID, puts them in the system. Once they're complete driver's ed, that tip card only allows them to drive with a driver's ed instructor. You cannot take your children driving with the tip card, okay? Once they complete driver's ed, and then they pass their written test and the driving test with their instructor, then they're able to get their permit at 15. At this point is when you can drive with them. So they're required by law to drive with you for at least 50 hours, a minimum of 50 hours, and 15 of those hours must be at nighttime. So 35 hours minimum during the daytime, 15 at nighttime. During this time is when you really are going to teach them how to drive, when they actually have a co-pilot with them that is going to try to introduce them to as much as they possibly can while you're able to be with them and coach them through this process so they're not trying to figure out all this on their own by themselves. Once you complete your requirements for the permit stage, then you move on to the intermediate driver's license stage at 16. And that kind of gives the freedom to go where you want to go and do what you want to do. However, it's going to still have some restrictions, okay? So the restrictions are going to be you're not able to drive after 11 p.m. You're not able to have more than one passenger in the vehicle with you after 6 p.m. And this is going to try to reduce the distractions that are available to them while they're driving this vehicle. We want to try to keep those distractions to as minimal as possible. They're also required to make sure everyone in the vehicle is buckled in properly. If someone in that car is not wearing their seatbelt properly, buckled in, they actually can be cited for that person who's not wearing a belt. So that's very important as well. Next, they're going to move on to their 17-year-old stage, which is their full-fledged driver's license, pretty much, as long as they don't get any at-fault crashes or moving violations, that kind of thing. Then they can move on to their driver's license stage at 17, but they still have one restriction, and that is phone usage. They're not able to use the phone while they're driving for any reason other than just an emergency call until they're 18 years old. So obviously no texting, no one can do that. But just speaking on the phone, talking on it, using it for GPS, you're not supposed to be using any kind of phone at all while you're driving until you're 18 years old. So that by the time they finish this whole process and go through all these stages, they've had a year and a half, 2 years, maybe 2.5 years of experience before they really get driving with no restrictions on them. So it's really been a very good program, very successful. We've seen a tremendous drop in our teen drivers once they go through this program, teen driving crashes. So it's really been effective, and hopefully we can continue to educate families on this program. And it's just been doing a lot of great work for us. So I'm glad we have it in place now, because we sure didn't have it when I got my license.
All right. Thank you, Trooper Flynn, on that good information regarding graduated driver's licenses. I realized early I didn't even introduce who I am, just so you know who's kind of helping us through this. I'm Nelson Hollings. I'm the North Shore Regional Safety Coalition Coordinator here at the Regional Planning Commission. So my apologies about that. Well, thank you for that information. We're going to move into the impaired driving section. And I think Avery has a few questions for you regarding impaired driving that she'll pose to you.
Sounds great.
Law enforcement must prove your blood alcohol concentration is over 0.02% in order to be arrested for a DUI. Is that true or false?
Okay, that is actually false. All right. So when we're out there on patrol, there's no way for us to know what a person is impaired by. There's no law on the books that says that we have to know what exactly is impairing a person before we can arrest them for DWI. So basically what we're looking for is impairment. And we're going to do some specific tests and look for specific signs that we're trained to look for. And a lot of the signs you would probably notice just as a average citizen as well. And we're going to look for certain things. The driver's not being able to coordinate movements, to have poor muscle control, coordination, balance, slurred speech, confusion. All these different things kind of jump out at us initially. But we're just looking for simply signs of impairment. And if we see those signs of impairment there, and we have probable cause to make a traffic stop and that you are impaired, then that is all we really need to make that arrest. And that could be alcohol or drug impairment. Anything that someone's putting into their system that's affecting the ability for their brain to process information normally. If they're operating a vehicle underneath that condition, then they can actually get charged with DWI.
Okay, thank you. Next question is it true that THC, the psychoactive component in marijuana, does not impair drivers enough to be considered dangerous, and that's why it's legal in some states?
No, that's absolutely false also. Actually, if you look this up, THC is the component of marijuana that actually causes the psychoactive changes in your brain. And it's been clinically proven that this drug attaches to certain portions of your brain, which affects the ability for your neurons to transmit information. And it actually affects the parts of your brain that regulate your balance, your posture, your coordination, your reaction time, your thinking, your problem solving, and your judgment, which are all things that you need in order to operate that vehicle safely. So no, it's not just that it's considered dangerous or that we don't want you under the influence of this substance and having your brain altered and your functioning of your brain altered while you're in control of your vehicle. That's not why it's legalized in other states, and there's plenty of reasons for that, but it definitely impairs your brain to the point where you should not be operating a vehicle when you're on it.
Okay, great. Are you allowed to refuse to take a breathalyzer?
Yes, actually by law, if you are arrested for DWI and we believe it's alcohol impairment, we will bring you to the lockup where you're getting a chance to blow in a breath machine, the breathalyzer. If you want to refuse that, the law still allows you to refuse that. Now, in Louisiana, we have what's called the no refusal program. And just about all of the parishes in Louisiana do use this program. And we have judges on standby 24/7 that we can type up a quick warrant and send it to them electronically. They will read through our entire case, make sure we have the right probable cause to make the arrest, look at our results from the field sobriety test to make sure that we actually do show signs of impairment. And usually they will sign that warrant for us and send it back to us. If they do that, now we have the ability to take your blood from you. And you cannot refuse to give us your blood once we have that warrant in our hands. So then we'll call EMS and we'll get someone to come to the lockup. And if we have to, we will actually hold the person's arm down and take that blood from them to get those results. So we don't have as many drivers as we used to that are refusing the test now because of this no refusal program. It's been a very successful program and most parishes are on board, but you do have the right to refuse it if you like. The problem is if you do refuse it, now you have longer penalties on your suspension of your driver's license for the DWI. So we're gonna suspend your license longer. We're going to still get the results. So it really doesn't benefit people to refuse those tests any longer.
Okay, thank you. Last question. Does alcohol not impair you until 0.06%? Did I say that?
No, that's going to be false also. So the first sip of alcohol that you put into your body, it actually starts taking effect on your brain. It will not cause drastic impairment initially, obviously, but the more alcohol you add to your blood system, to your bloodstream, as that content increases, the impairment also increases. So, but even at low levels of a 0.02, which is the state legal limit for anyone 20 and under, that's about a beer to 2 beers that may get a person to that level. And then a 0.08 is the limit for an adult 21 and over. But we still have impairment that's occurring, that's starting to occur prior to that 0.06, 0.08 level. So it's not drastic impairment. You probably won't notice it, but your brain is slowly becoming affected by these drugs that are getting entered to the brain through the blood.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Trooper Flynn. I think that pretty much concludes what we have on impaired driving. We're going to move on to our next subject matter expert. That's Jody Janusa, and she's going to be covering a growing problem within really all across the country, and that's distracted driving. So, Jody, if you want to kind of introduce yourself, tell us, your job, and basically how distracted driving, how do you interact with that every day in what you do?
Sure. So welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Jody Janusa. I'm the Trauma Program Manager at North Oaks Medical Center in Hammond, Louisiana. We're a level 2 trauma center, and distracted driving is actually one of the reasons why I have the job I have. We see it every day. There are so many different types of distractions these days, especially inside the vehicle as well as outside the vehicle. So basically just distracted driving, there's different forms of it, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But distracted driving is one of the reasons why we see the patients that we see. We see patients who are texting and driving. We see patients who are walking, not paying attention to the road, getting hit by vehicles. We see patients that are picking things up off the floor. We see patients that are changing the channel in their car or doing something on the computer in their car and getting, into head-on collisions. So there's a variety of patients we see, and distracted driving is that reason.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I think Avery's got some questions for you related to distracted driving.
Okay.
True or false, there are 3 types of distractions.
So that is very true. There are 3 types of distractions: manual, cognitive, and visual. Like I said, there's distractions inside the car, there's distractions outside the car. Manual distractions are things that you're doing inside the car. You're changing the radio station, you're picking something up off the ground. We recently had a patient that was injured by picking something up off the ground that they dropped. Then there's cognitive distractions. That ranges from just being emotionally distraught and driving to thinking about something. I don't know how many people I've heard that have said, oh, I don't know how I got here. I don't even remember driving. I got from point A to point B, and I don't remember how I got here because my mind was on something else. And you're completely distracted because you're not paying attention to the things that are going on between point A to point B. And visual distractions, of course. You're paying attention to things that are happening outside of the vehicle. How many times have we seen rubbernecking where we're paying attention to other crashes that happen on the side of the road, and then a crash happens right then and there with you in it? So that's definitely true. There are 3 types of distractions.
Thank you. Another question is, texting while driving is not a serious distraction.
So texting is one of the biggest distractions, so that is false. It involves all forms of distraction: manual, cognitive, and visual. You're taking your eyes off the road onto your phone. You're physically texting with your fingers, or you're talking into your phone, voice texting, which is one of a big thing we're seeing an uprise in, is voice texting, which is just as equal a distraction.
Okay, thank you. And last question, if I'm under 17 years old, I can legally talk on my cell phone, not just text while driving. No, just not text while driving.
So that's false. If you're under 17, it's illegal to talk and text while driving, and it is illegal to text while driving at all ages. Texting and driving is never a good idea, no matter what age you are.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Jody. And for all the work you do at North Oaks, we really appreciate it. We're going to move on now to occupant protection. And so for that, we have Patty Klesse. Patty, would you mind introducing yourself and what you do and why occupant protection is important to you and to all of us?
Sure. My name is Patty Klesse. Like I was introduced, I am a nurse at University Medical Center, which is a level 1 trauma center here in New Orleans. And I've been a nurse for 30 years. And the first 15 years of my career, I put people back together. And the last 15 years, I'm out in the community trying to prevent all those injuries, because we see way too many preventable crashes and injuries in our trauma center, that if they just would have made a better choice, they wouldn't have ended up there. So I'm very much committed, and I prefer to go out in the community and try to prevent those injuries and take care of those patients, because they really don't need to be there.
All right, thank you, Patty. I think Avery's got a few questions for you related to occupant protection.
Okay.
Okay, true or false? As long as the lap belt is on, the shoulder belt can be placed under my arm if it irritates my neck.
Actually, I get that question quite often, but remember, seatbelts are designed a certain way to protect you. If you don't wear them exactly how it's designed, you're going to lose that protection. So real quickly, let me let you know how a seatbelt is going to help save your life. The first thing it's going to do, it's going to prevent you from getting ejected out of the car. So when it's worn correctly, you know, all those safety features can help you, and you're going to stay in position. It's also going to crush your nice strong bones. So of course, it's going to be a clavicle, sternum, ribs, and hips. Your bones can handle those crash forces a lot better than those soft tissues and organs. So your neck is definitely soft. So you don't want to have that seatbelt riding on your neck. You want to make sure it comes across your clavicle and your sternum. It's going to protect your brain and spinal cord. So if you're not wearing that shoulder belt, you're going to go forward and you're not going to protect your brain and spinal cord. It's going to spread forces. When you wear it correctly, each part of your body receives a little bit of force instead of having it all in one area. And then it's going to provide deceleration, because you never want your body to come to a sudden stop. You want it to, you do want it to come to a, you want to slow down. You don't want to come to a sudden stop. That's when you have injury. So if your neck's irritated, check your owner's manual. You may be able to adjust the height of that seatbelt and get it off your neck, because you want to have that protection.
That sounds great. Thank you. Backseat passengers are less at a risk without a seatbelt. True or false?
Unfortunately, that's actually false also. I hate to keep going false on you here, but a lot of people think they're safer in the back seat because they got that big seat in front of them. But actually, the front seat has a lot more safety features in the back seat. But you have to remember that when you're in a crash, those forces are on every single person inside that vehicle. So you should always wear your seatbelt at every single seating position to protect yourself, and for the reasons I just told you.
Good to know. Thank you. Most crashes happen on the interstate. So if I'm going a short distance, there's no need for a seatbelt. Is that true or false?
That is absolutely false. You may hear about those interstate crashes because of the speed of the interstate, they tend to be a little bit more severe, but crashes happen way too often, and it happens on roads even very close to your home, because think about it, you travel in those roads most often. So you're definitely at high risk at all times when you're in your vehicle, so you should always wear your seatbelts.
Okay, and last question. An airbag alone will save my life.
Sorry, Avery, but that's also false. Airbags work with the seatbelt. So in order for that airbag to work correctly, you have to stay in position, and that's what the seatbelt does for you. If you're not wearing your seatbelt and you get ejected out of your seat, you're going to get basically punched at 200 miles per hour by that airbag. So the airbags work with the seatbelt. So they have to be both worn and have active airbags in your car to protect you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Patty, for all that information regarding occupant protection. We're going to move on to walking and bicycle safety. So Isabella Bustamante of Bike Easy will be leading this portion. Isabella, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, what you do, and why walking and biking safety is important, to everyone in the state of Louisiana.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Isabella, and I'm with Bike Easy. I'm their youth programs coordinator in New Orleans. Today, I just want to make sure that you are also looking out for your fellow cycling friends as you're riding, especially in New Orleans, where we have one of the fastest growing commuter cities in the South for people on bicycles, and the road should be used by everyone and shared by everyone. So as you are getting behind the wheel, you can look out for your friends on two wheels.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And I think Avery's got a few questions regarding the work that you do.
True or false? Are bikes considered vehicles?
That is absolutely true. Bikes are vehicles. They have steering, just like a car, and they also have brakes, just like a car, and have the right to be on the road. They also are subject to many of the same traffic rules as cars, such as stopping at lights and stopping at stop signs.
Great information, thank you. Also, true or false? Are people driving in cars allowed to drive or park in bike lanes?
So you may not park or drive in bike lanes. That's actually false. Occasionally you may have a situation where you'll have to turn sort of above and across a lane, which is okay, but to park there, you can get ticketed.
That's great to know, thank you. And the last question, do people have a right of way at crosswalks, at all crosswalks?
Yeah, so pedestrians, typically, you may be thinking of a crosswalk as like a painted line or something that's at a light, but we know that at a lot of intersections or roads where pedestrians cross, there may not be that painted line, there may not be a light, there might not even be a stop sign sometimes, but if a pedestrian is walking across the street, they do have the right of way.
Excellent, thank you so much. And I forgot to mention at the very beginning of this webinar, if any of you have any questions regarding some of the topics we're covering, please feel free to put them in the chat box. If we have time, we'll post them to our subject matter experts and see if they can provide that information. If we don't have that time, we run out, that's something that we can handle on our end. We'll give it to our subject matter experts and they'll be able to respond to it, and then we'll be able to share it with everyone afterwards. So please do not be scared to ask some questions. We're all here to learn about various things we're going over today.
And one thing actually, if you don't mind me adding, Avery, that you didn't ask is you can drive cars and you can also ride bikes. So you don't have to choose one or the other. We encourage you, even as you are getting your license, to continue to cycle. But if you need to pick up heavy things from the store, you can also now drive and make lugging a bunch of stuff much easier. So just because you're getting that license doesn't mean all of a sudden you should forget about your bike.
Thank you so much.
All right, and finally, we're going to go to infrastructure and operations. And today we have Scott Boyle here, who's going to talk about, this is, I like to call it the hard side, but the roadway elements And so, Scott, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and why roadway safety is important to you and DOTD?
Good evening, everybody. My name's Scott Boyle. I'm the Assistant District Administrator of Operations for the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. I work in District 02, which is the New Orleans district, which comprises of Orleans. It's the greater New Orleans area that comprises of Jefferson, Orleans, St. Charles, St. Bernard, Plaquemine, Terrebonne, and Lafourche parishes. I'm a civil engineer by trade. I'm licensed. I've been with the department over 26 years, and the primary focus of the position I'm in now is I'm over our traffic engineering division as well as our bridge maintenance division. Under traffic engineering, we look at intersections and corridors. That's our primary focus, is to look at spots based on data-driven type data, such as crashes and speeding and different things. We're responsible for traffic signals, for striping, and for signing. On our bridge maintenance side, we're responsible for performing routine inspection of all movable and fixed bridges on the state highway system, as well as others that are not on the state highway system. Those bridges need to be inspected typically on a 2-year cycle, and we look for everything from aesthetics to structural integrity, and make sure that when that they're safe for people to drive over. When we don't get any complaints or any concerns from people, that's when we know we're really doing our job. But there's a lot of work out there, and unfortunately, there's a lot of crashes that are occurring on a daily basis. So we're digging into those. We're working with our law enforcement partners, our parish and municipal partners on solutions to try and minimize these crashes that are occurring on a daily basis.
All right, thank you, Scott. I think Avery's got a few questions for you.
Hello, Mr. Scott. So we live in South Louisiana, South Lafayette, and starting earlier this year, there have been a great deal of road construction where J-turns are being constructed. What is the purpose of this?
A J-turn is an intersection modification where certain movements are restricted. The premise and the philosophy about constructing a J-turn at an intersection is to minimize conflicts at an intersection. With a typical J-turn, it occurs on a multi-lane median divided highway, and motorists approaching the intersection from the side street or the minor street approach are generally required to turn right. They're restricted from going across the 4-lane section. They're restricted from going across and turning left at the 4-lane section. Motorists are allowed to turn into the intersection left. Motorists that are on that side street approach, they're required to go right, and then they typically U-turn somewhere downstream of the intersection. Studies have found that this type of intersection has reduced crashes. It's actually been a quite nice alternative to a traffic signal. There are less maintenance, and crashes have gone down when J-turns are installed. And if you look on a plan view of an intersection that has a J-turn type of treatment to it, you'll see it looks like a hook type intersection or a J. So that's how they get their name.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, true or false? To enter a roundabout, look left and yield to drivers already in the roundabout.
That is true. Roundabouts are circular intersections, and roundabouts in our area, the traffic flows in a counterclockwise direction. They're typically yield controlled, and they're very efficient. They are in some cases, a superior alternative to a traffic signal. Once they're installed, the initial overall cost of a roundabout is higher than that of a traffic signal. But when they're appropriately applied, they're much more efficient, they're much less maintenance, and they also have been shown to reduce the reduction of severe crashes, because the people that enter the roundabout tend to enter at lower speeds.
Thank you. True or false, you should adjust your speed to match the flow of traffic before entering a roadway.
That is true. I'll give an example of the interstate. Well, two of the biggest types of crashes that occur on the interstate system are from excessive speeding, and they also occur when there's a difference in speeds of cars. If we could choose and hope, we would want all vehicles traveling at a very close speed. When you have somebody that would be entering the interstate and they try to merge in at 10, 20 miles an hour, and they try to merge in and somebody's coming up on them at 70, 80 miles an hour, that's not a recipe for a good outcome. So, unfortunately, some interstates and some ramps, especially in the downtown area, the merging areas and distances are very short. But, whenever possible, we do our best to ensure that we have more than adequate merging distances so cars can gain speed and they can get up to an acceptable speed of cars that are already on the main line, and they can safely merge in with little to no conflict.
Great, thank you. In heavy rain, you use your yellow, sorry. In heavy rain, you're supposed to use your yellow flashing lights.
Well, as many times as I've seen it, it's false. I've been on the road, I've been driving for quite a while, and I've seen many vehicles that when the rain is so severe that the wipers cannot disperse or displace the precipitation fast enough on the windshield. People's instincts come into play, and they typically slow down, and you'll see at least a very large percentage of drivers that'll put their flashes on. And the premise about that is I believe that they feel that that people can see them. The research that I've seen shows that sometimes that those flashes can actually impair vision. The most appropriate use of flashes on the road is when someone breaks down and they may be on side the road on the shoulder, just adjacent to the roadway edge, and flashes would be an appropriate use so motorists can see the presence of that stopped vehicle adjacent to the travel edge.
That's great to know. Thank you. Okay, true or false? Most of our fatal crashes in Louisiana take place at intersections.
That is false. And while unfortunately many crashes do occur at intersections, there are other roadway infrastructure where more crashes occur. One example would be, on the interstate, which is tied to high excessive speed, and another roadway infrastructure would be on 2-lane rural roads where you have also the potential for excessive speed and also a greater potential for a roadway departure crash where someone could lose control and go off the road and hit an object, a fixed object or trees or something of that nature. So, we certainly look at all fatalities, including the ones at intersections, which tend to be, most crashes or a lot of crashes that occur at intersections in general tend to be lower speeds, but unfortunately on the interstates and on rural 2-lane undivided roadways, there are also a lot as well.
Great, thank you. And the last question, is a car wreck called an accident?
We refer to the touching or the collision of vehicles as crashes. I've heard the word accident before, and there's legal reasons about why a crash may or may not be an accident. There certainly is a potential for there to be no reason or an unexpected outcome for a crash, but in the traffic engineering and the safety circles that we travel in. We refer to these as crashes. We certainly would not label a driver getting behind the wheel drunk and driving 100 miles an hour necessarily as being an accident, or just someone driving 100 miles an hour in general being an accident. If they, that there was certain amounts of intent there. So we refer to these type of events, and we refer to those as crashes, and then we clarify as to what type of crashes they are, whether they were rear end crashes or roadway departure crashes or right angle crashes. So, but those are referred to in the safety and law enforcement and engineering professions as crashes, Avery.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for all that information regarding infrastructure and operations. This basically concludes the section where we're kind of having posed questions to our subject matter experts. Over the course of our dialogue, we've received a lot of questions from some of our audience, and so we want to take this opportunity to read some of them off to you, see if some of our subject matter experts can offer their expertise in this and try and answer some of these questions. Elizabeth Morris, who is the New Orleans Regional Traffic Safety Coalition Coordinator here at the Regional Planning Commission with me, will actually be asking the question. So we'll kind of ask it and pose it to y'all, and hopefully you'll be able to help us out.
Okay, so the first question we have is, what if a person is crossing the street outside the crosswalk in the middle of the block? I think that's referring to, do they still have the right of way? So if Isabella or maybe Danny, if y'all have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, generally, when we're dealing with pedestrians, look, the vehicles, obviously, if it contacts a pedestrian, there's going to be a lot of damage and a lot of injuries. So we never want to have, that's one of the biggest things that causes me to have the hair stand up on my back of my neck when I hear the word ejection or when I hear the word pedestrian when they're dispatching us to a crash scene. We know there's going to be some serious injuries, and we know it's going to be just a horrific situation. But when someone's trying to cross the roadway, that crosswalk lane, if they have one available, is where the person's supposed to cross. They're not supposed to just run across the roadway at any point, because if there's painted crossings at that intersection, then drivers are preparing themselves mentally to potentially see a pedestrian at that location, but they may not be ready for someone to just run across the road at any other point. So we always ask you, please use the crosswalks if they're available. You also have to understand that it takes time for vehicles to slow down and stop. You can't, just because you have the right of way as a pedestrian, you cannot wait until the car is approaching you and gets within a close proximity before you step out into the roadway, because that vehicle has to have time to react and then come to a stop. So, some of these crashes get kind of touchy sometimes on should the driver have stopped, should the person have stepped out there, and that's where, our investigative skills kind of come in. But you just have to be extra cautious and extra careful. And if there's any chance at all that you think this car may not stop, I would just wait. If they have signals that you can activate to cross those roadways, use those crossway signals, those crosswalk signals, and that way it changes the signal light potentially for the motorist. But I think you have to use the crosswalk if it's available.
Yeah, like Danny said, obviously, if there is a top or a bottom point to the road that you're on, and there isn't a crosswalk, it's preferable to go to that top or bottom of the road where an intersection is, or a pathway is, rather than coming out in the middle. But be extra mindful for especially in suburban areas or highly densely populated areas. There may be people that are walking out of a driveway. They might not be using a vehicle. So either way, there could be someone coming out, and just those are sometimes other things besides pedestrians that you wouldn't expect maybe in the middle of a street to interrupt your driving.
Yeah, and generally those areas where you have to worry about someone stepping out of the driveway or something, those speeds will be a lot lower. in those areas as well. So you should have time to be able to react if you're going the proper speeds. That's why you'll see those 20-mile-per-hour speeds in your neighborhood as opposed to a 35 or 40-mile-an-hour speed on state highways. So that way you have time to react if someone does step out where there is no crosswalk.
Okay, thank you guys. That's some great information. Our next question is, do bikes that are retrofitted with a motor, do they require a license? Are they considered a bike or a scooter or a motorbike? What's up with those?
Well, what I believe you're talking about is an e-bike, and there are many kind of different e-bikes and classifications for what is a motorized bike, something like a Vespa or a scooter or a moped, where you may typically see a small license plate on the back. So definitely something like a motorbike or a Vespa or a scooter bike like they have in Europe would it require to have a license plate on the back, but something like we have here in New Orleans, for example, our Blue Crew, which are the bikes in the city that you can just rent on an app and borrow, have an electric motor inside of them that allow you to pedal and move. So those would be considered bike lanes. But I believe there's also a speed distinction maybe as well for how fast they can go, which I do not know what that speed distinction is. But if it can go as fast as a car, I would say safe to say that is something that you should have a motorcycle license.
Okay, thank you. The next question. So just to be sure, even if there is not a crosswalk in the middle of the road or a highway and a pedestrian is trying to cross, they still have the right of way. I guess, I think we kind of answered that. I guess what if you have an unmarked crosswalk?
So in an unmarked crosswalk, they would still have the right of way.
Okay, thank you. So many questions. So next question. As a driving instructor, if the child we are driving is not an experienced driver and is weaving as we are trying to teach, can the instructor get ticketed?
I guess that question would be for me, since I'm the only one who can write tickets. I guess that there'd be a discretionary call on the officer's part. If they're training someone how to drive and that person has not mastered the driving techniques yet, I mean, we obviously wouldn't ticket someone unless they did something, maybe cause someone else to react and lose control or would cause a crash or something, then yes, they would be cited and would be ticketed. That's why instructors really, that's their expertise, to really kind of feel out what is the experience level of these new drivers. They usually take them to a parking lot initially until they feel like they're comfortable enough to get amongst traffic, and then they'll bring them out there. But it's kind of a judgment call. But if we see someone weaving out of traffic, in and out of the lane, and we may stop you and ask you what's going on, and if an instructor says, no, I'm just trying to instruct them on how to drive this thing, then we'll probably just cut them a break and advise them maybe go to someplace off the roadway, especially if it's a high traffic area with many vehicles. We don't want them striking another vehicle and getting in some kind of a legal situation or liability situation because they made a mistake and weren't prepared for the situation that they got themselves into. So yeah, I guess that have to be on a case by case basis.
Okay, thank you. The next question, if traffic is backed up in a left turning lane, should I still get in the turning lane? Maybe that's a question for Scott or Danny.
Can you repeat that, please?
If traffic is backed up in a left turning lane, should I get in the turning lane?
if traffic is backed up in a left turning lane, should you?
Get in the turning lane. It might be if you have a 4-lane highway with the turning lane in the middle. If it's backed up in the turning lane, do you get into it or do you stay in the traffic lane? If that's right. Michael, let me know if I'm totally off base.
I'm not really following. I mean, if it's backed up and you're not able to get into it, then you're not able to get into it. Can you post the verbiage of that on? I'm looking at the chat log.
Yes, I'll. I will send that. Okay, I'll send that to you and we'll just keep rolling. If we don't answer it now, we'll make sure that we get it to y'all. The next one is, does the immediate license turn, I guess intermediate license, turn into a full license once the student turns 17 years old?
Yes, once they turn 17, they will automatically qualify for the 17 license, and the other restrictions will drop off as long as they haven't received any kind of at fault crashes or moving violations or anything that would cause someone to be concerned about them getting losing those restrictions. But generally at 17, the restrictions do drop off.
Okay, thank you. The next one, can a driver request that a police officer follow him or her to a lighted area so the passenger can feel safe? Or what is the understanding of stopping drivers in dark, unsafe areas?
Absolutely. We have no problem if you're concerned about the safety of the location where we have initiated the traffic stop. If you continue moving to a well-lit location, as long as you don't speed off away from us, we'll be pretty understanding of your situation, especially if it's an unmarked vehicle. Like the vehicle that I drive is a fully marked unit, so it has, markings everywhere, light bar on top of it. Everyone knows when I drive that car around that it's a police car. We have other vehicles that are unmarked or semi-marked that may not look as obvious, and they may have lights that are hidden in the dashboard, on the dash, inside the windshield, or in the grill area of the vehicle. And if you're concerned that they may not be a real police officer or someone that's acting like a police officer and trying to lure you to pull over for some kind of criminal activity, I always suggest keep driving, call 911, get the dispatcher on the phone, and tell them your location, tell them what car you're in. If you have your registration right there, read them your license plate number, and they will call the agencies in the area to verify if it's an actual police officer. If for some reason they cannot do that, they will dispatch one of us to go up there and try to meet you and see if that vehicle is actually a real police officer. So it's actually a real concern. We had some people over the last couple of years that have been taken advantage of in that way. So absolutely, if you feel you can go to a safer location, do so. Get off of that highway if you can. And if you're not comfortable stopping on the side of the road, that's totally fine. Just don't do anything that would look like you're trying to evade that traffic stop.
Okay.
Elizabeth, I've received the question and I believe I'm ready to answer it when you are.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. So this is back to the question, y'all, about if traffic is backed up in a left turning lane, should I still get in the turning lane?
Okay, so I believe that the question implies a left turn bay or an auxiliary lane that's backing up it with the potential to spill into the through lane that would possibly block the through lane from going forward. If you need to turn left there, yes, yeah, the left turn lanes are designed for adequate storage. The traffic signals are timed to clear out those queues in that left turn lane. If that's an issue that's recurring, then we as a department need to go out there and look at those timings and possibly add more green time for that left turn movement so that doesn't happen. But yeah, if you need to turn left, you need to wait, and then as soon as you can get in. Certainly, nobody wants to impede the flow of through traffic, but if you're as a signalized intersection, there's a greater chance than not that there's already some congestion going on at that location. But we work very hard to review those traffic signal timings to ensure that those left turn lanes do not spill over into the through lanes. And that's how we keep that, in addition to making the left turn lanes long enough to where vehicles, the anticipated demand, can be stored.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And just following up on a earlier question, Isabella wanted y'all to know that an e-bike is generally does not exceed a top speed of somewhere around 20 to 28 miles per hour. Therefore, it does not need a license. Their electric motors are generally powered up to 750 watts. So thank you for that further information. This is going to be our last question that we answer live, but if you ask the question and we haven't gotten to it, we will make sure to circulate it to our speakers and send it in a follow-up email to all of you. So the last question is, are you still supposed to yield to a bus with its stop sign out, even though the bus driver is picking their child up at school and they're not on the bus? Michael, I'm not totally understanding that question. I can unmute you if you want to ask that.
If the bus is parked outside of the school. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So say
Can you
the
repeat
bus
your
driver,
question?
so say the bus driver is off the bus picking up a child of theirs and they got their stop sign out, do you still stop or do you proceed to go cautiously?
I believe that the bus drivers are supposed to only put the stop signs out when they're loading the bus, just in case any children could be running across the street. Now, you're talking about if it's parked outside of a school or just on a roadway?
A school.
So it's a street that runs along adjacent to the side of a school, or
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't imagine that they should have the stop signs out there to load at school. Maybe they do that. I'm not really familiar with that, but I would say if the stop signs are out, then you probably should stop. If that is an issue and it's causing traffic backup, you can notify the local law enforcement in that area, and maybe we can talk to the bus companies or the parish, whoever runs those buses, and try to get a clarification on what they're wanting the drivers to do. They could have an issue where they've had someone fly through there or something and cause problems before. Maybe a traffic volume come through there at high speeds that could cause a hazard to the children loading on the buses, and maybe that's why they do it now. But generally, if the signs are out, you're supposed to stop. So that may be a special case.
Okay, thank you for that. Nelson, you want to wrap it up? It's 7 o'clock.
All right, well, it's 7 o'clock, guys. I want to thank each and every one of you for attending the webinar today. We really appreciate the work you do related to traffic safety. You guys as driving schools, as well as students, that are out on the road, y'all are really kind of one of the most important pieces we have involved in trying to get, our loved ones back home safely from wherever they're coming from. So we really appreciate all the work that you do and the time you spend educating the youth on traffic safety. So thank you all so much for your attendance. Please, we're entering the Christmas season. Many of us will be hitting the roads. 2021 is much like 2020 was a deadly year in the world of traffic safety. So please have a conversation with your friends and families about putting phones down, not driving impaired, wearing your seatbelt, and being cognizant of our friends and family members that are walking and biking on our roadways. So, you know, that conversation that you have today can really save someone's life. So thank you all so much for everything you do. And that concludes our webinar.
Thank y'all. Have a good night.
Thank you.